Hey everybody, today we'll be looking at normal and inferior goods. Now whether a good is normal or inferior depends on the relationship between the income of the individual and the demand for this good. If you remember, we said that demand is determined by several factors. Let's say demand for X was a function of the price of X and of income, and we can have also price of a related good Y. We have preferences, we can have population, and so on. This can go on. Now, the law of demand explained the relationship between dx and p of x, and we said that given everything else is constant, then we'll have a negative relationship between d of x and p of x. Now, we are interested in what happens to the demand for x if y is changing. And we can have two scenarios. The first one would be if income increases, we can expect that demand for good x will increase. Now, this is a positive relationship. So, i.e., a positive relationship. Now, whenever this happens, we say that we are talking about a normal good. So in this case, X will be a normal good. So if you want to think of an example, pretty much everything follows this trend. Let's say if my income increases, maybe I would like to have more houses. So in this case, property would be a normal good. It can be computers, it can be guitars, it can be cars, it can be any kind of gadget, it can be even food. You know, we get richer, we like to keep more food in the fridge. Sometimes, however, we can observe a negative relationship. So if y increases, so let's say a person is getting richer, we might see that the demand for x will be decreasing. Oh, by the way, this should be an arrow. So if y increases, the demand for x should be decreasing. So in this case, this will be a negative relationship, so i.e. a negative relationship between x and y, between actually d of x and y. So if this is the case, then x will be an inferior good. So x is an inferior good. So let's think about an example. Imagine a person is at a very low level of income and he needs to feed himself. So one of the cheapest foodstuffs that you can buy would be probably rice. So this person at a low level of income will be consuming a lot of rice. Basically, his entire diet might be compromising of just eating rice. As his income increases, now this person might say, you know what, I've been eating enough rice. Maybe I can decrease the amount of rice I'm eating, and instead I can buy some veggies and some meat and some other foodstuffs. So what we are going to observe is that as income rises, the demand for the good, in this case rice, will start to decline. And this is what we call an inferior good. Now, we can illustrate the effect of change in income on the demand curve. And we're going to do just that. Okay, so in this diagram, we're going to have the quantity of x that's being demanded for a given time period. And then on the vertical axis, we're going to have the price of X. And this is our typical downward sloping demand curve. Now, let's say case 1, X is a normal good. So if income increases, then we want to illustrate the demand for X is rising because we have a positive relationship between D of X and Y. However, we cannot move along in the traditional way that we were doing when we were changing the price. So we effectively need to draw a new demand curve. We need to draw a demand curve that's greater than the old one because the demand for X is increasing. And the only way we can do that is when we shift the demand curve to the right. So let's say this is my D0, the old one. And to draw the new one, I'm going to simply shift it to the right, and this will be D1. We can see that for any price level, let's say P0, at a price level P0, D0 would generate a quantity Q0, but at the same price P0, D1 will generate a quantity Q1. So we can see that for any price level, D1 will have greater quantity demanded than D0. Thus, the demand for good X is increasing. Similarly, if, let's say, income is falling down, in this case, the demand for X, given that X is a normal good, should decrease. And this will be illustrated by a leftward shift. So we can say here, in this case, from D0 to D1. And in this case, it will be from D0 to D2, which we're about to draw. And D2 needs to be to the left of D0, so it will move this way. Let's say this is my D2. And now we can see that at price P0, when the demand declines to D2, we're going to generate a quantity demanded of Q2, and Q2 is less than Q0, which is less than Q1. So we can see how the rightward shift of the demand curve illustrates an increase in the demand, and a leftward shift in the demand curve illustrates a decrease in the demand. Now we can do a very similar example with a situation when X is an inferior good. Let's just quickly do that. So case 2, X is an inferior good. Imagine that the person is becoming richer. The general population's income level is rising. So if Y is increasing and X is an inferior good, we are going to observe a decline in the demand for X. So let's say this is the old demand, and as our income rises, demand should be decreasing. So this is D1, and we have a shift to the left. If Y falls down, then we can expect demand for X to increase. And we're going to move to D2. We have a rightward shift in the demand curve. Now, why is this important? Imagine that you are a producer and you are selling a normal good. And imagine that the government comes up with its annual statistics and it forecasts an increase in the GDP of the country. And they say that the GDP will rise. The GDP, which is the total output the country produces, it's equivalent to the national income of the country, more or less. We are simplifying it a bit, but in general, output will be equal to income. So if you're expecting that the income per capita, let's say on average a person is getting richer to be increasing, this would mean that you can expect an increase in the demand for your good. If you hear that the forecasts are negative for the GDP per capita and the demand will be, income will be falling, then if you're producing an inferior, forget about the title, but if you're producing a normal good and you're expecting falling income per capita, then probably you will be expecting a decline in the demand for your product. And vice versa, if you're producing an inferior good, if you're selling an inferior good, actually a decline in people's income may be good for you or good for your business because people will be demanding more of your product. An interesting situation. Finally, I want to show you something called the angle curve. It's called an angle curve after a German economist whose name was Engel, obviously. That's how in economics we name our curves. And the angle curve will have quantity demanded for a product on the horizontal axis, and it will have the income of the household on the vertical axis. And what it shows is that as at low levels of income, my mistake, I got a bit confused. At low levels of income, so over here, as income is beginning to increase, the quantity demanded for this good will increase. So we are going to see this positive relationship. But at some moment, as income continues to rise, this good will turn into an inferior good. So this section of the diagram shows normal good, the good is a normal. And in this section at the diagram, the good is inferior. We have negative relationship between y and d of x, and over here we have positive relationship between y and d of x. You may be thinking to yourself, well, hold on, how come a good is normal and then inferior? Well, actually at low levels of income, all goods are normal goods. Imagine, you have absolutely no income. As your income increases, you would want to buy some rice. As your income continues to increase, you would want to buy even more rice. As your income continues to increase, you may then decide and say, hold on a second, maybe I can swap some of the rice that I've been buying for veggies and meat. And then you start changing your diet. So then the rice will become an inferior good. And meat now is normal good. So you continue to buy meat. And let's say you buy meat from your local supermarket. But if your income continues to rise, you may say, well, hold on a second. You know, this meat from my local supermarket is not that good. Maybe I want meat from some, place where the cows were listening to Mozart or something like that. You know, it's like I want an expensive steak. So the demand for the meat from your local grocery store is declining, and then you want to buy that organic, exquisite stuff. It's the same thing with hardware goods. At low levels of income, you maybe want to buy a phone or a second phone. As your income increases, you may decide that the phone is no longer cool, or you don't need it, you have too many of them, and then your demand for them may decrease. So in a nutshell, that's it. That's the relationship between normal and inferior goods. They simply illustrate what's the relationship between income and demand. With normal goods, as income increases, the demand for that good will increase, and with inferior goods, if income increases, then the demand for those will decrease. And remember, all goods at low levels of income are normal, and eventually, as income increases, they may become inferior. Okay, folks, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you again.